One day the executive producer of the news taps on the office, which I share with someone. I didn't have enough status to have my own office. Would I mind going up to New York for a few days to fill in for Betty Furness? Barbara Walters has already left NBC, or rather, they've put her on ice. She's taken the job at ABC to be the first female co-anchor of a network newscast with Harry Reasoner, the first $1 million anchor. So they pull her off the Today Show. Betty Furness is subbing for her all summer. And Betty needs some time off. Could I go to New York to do the Today Show? Okay. So I go to New York. And that night I'm in a hotel in New York City, pretty nervous. And my sister calls from Pittsburgh. She's read in her local newspaper that I'm one of 5 women auditioning for Barbara Walters' job. She reads this to me. I slept 45 minutes. One of those nights where you watch the clock, every 10 minutes. Nope, I'm still not asleep. So I definitely, when the alarm went off, I had been asleep, but it was 45 minutes. What they were doing, they had 5 or 6 women, NBC correspondents. Linda Ellerby was one, Betty Rollin, the late Cassie Mackin, who probably was, the lead NBC political. She was the first woman to be a floor reporter at a political convention and happened to be gorgeous. And Kelly Lang, who was a phenomenal local newscaster at KNBC in Los Angeles. And me. I was the youngest by 5 years or 4 decades. So even though I was nervous and slept 45 minutes, I was otherwise pretty calm because, I had a shot at this. So, my goal was not to embarrass myself, but I wasn't in the running. And Lloyd Dobbins was was filling in for Jim Hartz, and he's this sardonic guy. Didn't take anything seriously, didn't take the network seriously, didn't take me seriously, but he liked me. And
put you at ease.
He thought I was funny, and I had nothing to lose. And we were great. And that was a Friday, and all weekend, my sister came and we hung out in New York City, and then I did Monday and Tuesday with Lloyd and went back. And then I watched this cavalcade of other women, doing the same thing. And I'm watching and I'm thinking, she's good, but she's not that good. And now I'm starting to maybe kind of think I could be. And the local reporters are thinking, she's out of her mind. If, she's not, this isn't going to happen. And it did. And it did.
Now, those were on-air auditions?
They were on-air auditions. It was like a reality show. I learned something recently, and by recently I mean within the last month. I had lunch with Dick Wald, who was the president of NBC News at that time, the man who called me at my apartment in Chicago and said, go sit down. Okay, you're sitting down. Okay, you got the job. You want the job. I said yes. And he said, okay, go walk around the block and then go to work, but don't tell anybody. The reason he told me not to tell anybody was that he hadn't told anybody. And he was calling me to find out, if offered the job, would you take it? And I said yes. At that point, then he could go tell NBC, I have made my decision. It's Jane. She's agreed to take the job. So I thought he didn't want me to tell anybody because they were going to put out a news release. He literally hadn't informed anybody at NBC who his decision was. And furthermore, the other women in that reality cavalcade, none of them were the competition except for Betty Furness. Mm-hmm. There were 3 possibilities. Betty Furness, who at that time was, I'm now 60. She was 60 or 63 or something. And a film star. and he picked me.
Why?
I don't know what his gut was, and I'm sure because he's a really smart man. And I later saw in a newspaper, and by later, I never read my own press. That's one thing I learned in Chicago is do not read your own press, because if I did, it was, a minefield. So, and I particularly wasn't inclined to anyway, because if it was insulting, it would be painful. And and sometimes people would write glowingly, and I wouldn't believe that. I'm very level-headed and realistic. So good news, bad news, I just didn't read my press. So I came across a clipping that I married an archival person. My husband is working upstairs, but he kept everything. And after I had even written a book, a memoir, I still hadn't gone back to read my clips. And I came across one, a 20-year-old Washington Post article, I think it was, about me, and the executive producer, Paul Friedman, was quoted as saying that there had been audience research. And despite my youth and relative inexperience, I had won every category but one, and that was experience. So, to the degree that the public weighed in, that didn't hurt me any. I also heard a story that that the wives of NBC executives who were meeting in Los Angeles at an annual affiliates conference, that the wives liked me. I don't know what the story was, but I was the first baby boomer to sit at a network anchor desk, and at the time that wasn't even mentioned. The baby boom was on no one's radar. At now 25, when I was introduced by my new partner, Tom Brokaw, who was fairly young by network news standards himself. He was still in his 30s. But nobody was thinking, of this tsunami of baby boomers who were all now out of college, coming into college, out of college, first jobs, entry-level jobs. We were coming. No one really was paying attention to that implication. All over the country in local news, you'll find local anchor teams. And it tended to be the Floyd Calvert, Jane Pauley, a man in his 50s, a woman in her 20s. That was in local news all over the country. That had become the pattern. Network news, Network news had not followed that. Look for female talent. Barbara Walters was such an anomaly. I mean, she was there by her own drive and talent and ambition. The networks were slow to pick that up. So when they gave me the job, it wasn't, the youth quake. It was like the zeitgeist really hadn't announced itself, except in that unconscious way that, the timing was right for someone who was young.